I've met my fair share of rebels, freedom fighters, and revolutionaries. From the chaotic rabble that occupied Wall Street at Zuccotti Park, to the stoic student leaders in Hong Kong who formed skirmish lines with the police during the Umbrella Movement. I've seen Taiwanese college kids fighting for their right to exist. I've seen Palestinian and Israeli activists fighting for the right to coexist. I've seen Black Lives Matter's protesters break down and cry and hug police officers. I've also seen them set dumpsters outside of my office on fire. They were most likely from Philly. And most recently, I've met heroic Ukrainian civilians running arms to the front to fight those orcs flooding over their border. Each movement is different, and they have different causes, different types of people and cultures involved. But there's one thing that all resistance movements share in common, and it's the fact that they are disorganized at first. Things are just cobbled together with good intentions and individual efforts. In place of structure, rules, and good pay, you just have individuals who are emotionally invested in the fight. But 100 passionate voices without a direction is hardly an army, and this is why most resistance movements fail and collapse. The other thing that they don't tell you about resistance movements in news and the Hollywood version of events is that most of these movements, in all honesty, are made up of less than competent individuals. You're rarely going to find a Luke Skywalker or Wedge Antilles. Heck, it'll even be hard to find a Jectono Porkins amongst the ranks of your average resistance movement. And that's because no matter how good a cause is, no matter how just the fight is, joining a resistance is kind of crazy and irrational. Unfortunately, a lot of the times the most skilled and competent individuals are already working for the establishment, or at least understand from a rational standpoint that resistance is oftentimes futile. This is why the Rebel Alliance has always depended on hope and inspiration more than anything else for its success. The Rebels understood that the only thing that could really turn the tide against the massive galactic empire was an idea, something that could ignite the wider populace to join its ranks. In our recent video covering the importance of Mon Mothma, we talked about how little control the Senator actually had in those early days of the war. She had to carefully guide the volatile organization known as the Alliance to restore the Republic so that it did not commit itself too early to a major battle and get destroyed. She had to preserve the rebellion until it had gathered enough strength so that any sacrifice that it did make had a chance of sparking a larger rebellion. In those early days, the tools that Mon Mothma had were limited to special force units and intelligence officers, but she had no sharper instrument than an individual known as Cassian Andor. Cassian Andor is not what one pictures when they think hero. He might dress similar to Han Solo, but his slender frame barely fills out his clothes, and instead of having that chiseled jawline, he has a thinner and more gaunt face. If I didn't know who he was, I would say that he looked like a common street thug from the lower levels of Coruscant. It's not the type of face you would want plastered all over the holograms in the entertainment district of Coruscant, but it's the exact type of face you want for a field operative. Cassian Andor wasn't just a walk-on to the rebel cause, though. He was more or less born into the movement. Like many other prominent rebel heroes, Cassian Andor came from the Outer Rim. His home planet, Fess, was a cold and mountainous planet that was primarily populated by human beings. Cassian Andor had lost his father fighting against the Empire's predecessor, the Galactic Republic, during the Clone Wars. And so, by 20 BBY, Andor would join the Separatist Alliance fight at the young age of 6, continuing the long-lived Star Wars tradition of child soldiering. Now, Cassian would quickly evolve from throwing stones at clone troopers to something a bit more hectic and violent. He would eventually be known as one of the most capable intelligence officers within the Rebel Alliance. Now, I'm sure we're going to find out more about his backstory in the upcoming Cassian Andor TV series. When your entire space fleet consists of just a few converted Mon Calamari civic buildings with bolted-on weapons, engines, and shields, and a bunch of diplomatic cruisers, your military operations immediately are going to become very limited. Sure, you have hero units like Luke Skywalker, but even on his best day, his X-Wing can handle at most, a few TIE fighters, or maybe a small Imperial cruiser if the Force is on his side that day. You see, the rebels had to be extremely careful in how they expended their resources, especially in those earlier days of the Galactic Civil War. And so having solid intel on a location was extremely important. It was so important that the Rebel Alliance called their hidden operatives Fulcrum, which is the point on which a lever rests and on which it pivots. The fulcrum is a really small piece of the operation, but if it's used efficiently, it can exponentially increase the power of your force. Originally, fulcrum was the name of a subspace communication frequency used by Jedi General Anakin Skywalker in order to communicate with the Andoranian rebel known as Saw Gerrera during the Clone Wars. It would be Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's apprentice, who would reestablish the word as her code name when she was operating under Senator Bail Organa's intelligence network. Other rebels would take on this title of fulcrum after Ahsoka Tano. This included ISB agent Alexander Callis, and of course, Captain Cassian Andor. Because of the actions of various fulcrum agents, the Rebel Alliance was always able to punch way above its weight, and it was also able to avoid some very disastrous defeats. The Fulcrum call sign was responsible for helping Rebel Sabby and Wren extract defectors, including future Rebel Ace Wedge Antilles from Skystrike Imperial Academy. Fulcrum would warn the rebels that the Empire was making a move to blockade the planet of Mykopo and place it under martial law. This prompted the rebels to evacuate all of their personnel from the planet. The Fulcrum agents weren't just a part of a spy network, though. They directly fell into line with the main rebel ideology. For instance, when Fulcrum warned the Special Forces unit known as Spectre not to risk capture by trying to free Kanan Jarrus from Imperial authorities, it didn't completely abandon Spectre when they went ahead anyway and rescued the Jedi. Fulcrum would dispatch Phoenix Cell to rescue the Spectres after they extracted the Jedi from Imperial hands. Officially speaking, Cassian Andor wasn't a spy, although he did carry out his fair share of field operations. For instance, K2SO was a KX series Imperial security droid that he deactivated on a mission to Wikako. K2SO proved to have extremely valuable data in his memory banks, which Cassian managed to bring back for extraction. It was a really difficult mission. K2SO tried to kill Andor on several occasions when the droid relapsed into its former Imperial programming. Cassian also took part in the famous Rogue One operation on Scarif. But for that entire Scarif operation to even happen, well, everything really depended on Cassian Andor's ability to recruit other individuals to the cause. You see, Cassian was trusted and tasked by the Rebel High Command to seek out new potential collaborators. Either Imperials who were looking to make a quick buck, or Imperials who had become disillusioned by their government's policies. Or it could just be some individual who happens to be in an opportune place to give the rebels good intel. The job wasn't easy, of course. Cassian wasn't a Jedi. He couldn't read minds or use the Force to battle his enemies. He was just a driven flesh and blood human being, and oftentimes his mistakes would lead to the deaths of those around him, including the individuals he was trying to recruit. One of the first sources Andor used to help the rebellion uncover the existence of the Death Star was a man named Tavik. He was an informant who worked directly with Saw Gerrera's partisans, and while exchanging information to Andor about the Imperial defector known as Bodhi Rook, the pair were intercepted by stormtroopers. Tavik, who had injured his arm in a previous incident, clearly couldn't escape with him. So Andor put a blaster bolt into his back to make sure that he wouldn't be captured and reveal important secrets. This is sort of what made Cassian Andor so valuable. He was born into war, so he knew what hesitation in dangerous situations could do. It takes a certain type of individual to kill an ally in order to save the entire organization. And it was this ruthlessness that really made Cassian Andor one of Mon Mothma and Bail Organa's favorite operatives. Of course, this type of lifestyle has a toll, especially if you carry on with it for over 20 years.
Everything I did for the rebellion. And every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself it was for a cause that I believed in. A cause that was worth it. Without that, we're lost. Everything we've done would have been for nothing. I couldn't face myself if I gave up now.
What's brilliant about Cassian Andor compared to other heroes like the Jedi was the fact that he was willing to sacrifice everything for his end goal, which was to defeat the Empire, even if it meant sacrificing his moral values and his future legacy. His actions are nowhere near as visible as Luke Skywalker's famous attack run on the Death Star Trench. He even takes backseat to Jyn Erso in his own operation to recover the Death Star plans. But that's okay for Andor. He's not in it for the glory or fame. He is truly committed to a galaxy without the Empire. Rebellions really can't succeed without the sacrifice of individuals like Cassian Andor. But let me know in the comment section below what you think about my analysis. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy,